This is not about whether or not the Holocaust narrative defined as legal fact is historical fact or not. This is about whether it is in the public interest, and even in the interests of that narrow special interest group Holocaust denial laws claim to be protecting, to continue with the current Holocaust denial and hate speech laws. The self-defined identity Jew means no more or less to me than any other inherited identification. I consider it as artificial, arbitrary, and unfortunate, as any other exclusive identity. As I consider the cult of Judah as unfortunate as any other cult. I consider Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Marxism, global climate crisis, and many other cults all to be subsidiaries of the cult of Judah which Herod the Great, then Jesus, attempted to free the Jews from enslavement to. I love and admire, per capita, more self-defined members of this artificially constructed social identity/community, known generally as Jews, than any other such social construct. Clearly any charges of anti-Semitism mean zero to me. I actively seek the participating of Jews in my project to liberate them. In the tradition of King Herod the Great, and Jesus, from their cult bondage. As I seek to liberate members of all and every cult, from their bondage to their particular cult. The advocates for Holocaust denial laws and museums and movies and books, and the legally forced teaching of the Holocaust narrative in public schools, are often sincere in their motives. Believing they are doing something good. That forcing people to accept a particular narrative is good for society. To prevent what they believe happened, from happening again. I am not here to challenge those beliefs about what did or didn't happen. It is a criminal offense in Australia and Germany to do that. And this essay is targeted at the Australian and German people, and authorities. So whatever proof and compelling arguments I might be able to offer you about what happened under National Socialism, that might contradict the official legal facts and narratives would of course need to be self-censored. What I am hoping to do here is convince you that your beliefs about Holocaust denial and hate speech laws, are not a good thing. I am not arguing about whether or not the Holocaust narrative is a legal fiction or a historical fact. It is not possible to do that. So no one will do that. The fact is, even if a Jew came forward with extremely detailed documentation about a conspiracy to lie to the world about what happened under National Socialism, even if thousands of Jews came forward with video footage of confessions of the conspirators, they would all go to prison, and have their lives ruined. Their evidence would be destroyed. They would be defined as Holocaust deniers. Their evidence and compelling arguments all defined as hate speech. You would never get to see that documentation. That evidence. Those videos. Those confessions. There is no way, under the current laws, to even attempt to contradict the Holocaust narrative imposed upon us, from birth, by the authorities. With the backing of all the forms of state violence at the disposal of the legal system? So as a sane person, I would not dream of bothering to bring forward any sort of argument or evidence that might be deemed to contradict the official legal factual narrative called the Holocaust. Anyone who claims this is some veiled attempt at doing so is mistaken. I have no desire to sacrifice what is left of my life, for a quixotic project. I will never break those laws, knowingly. I will never publicly deny the Holocaust. If I have any evidence or compelling arguments against that official legal narrative, I will self-censor. Even if I have mere doubts. Or am skeptical. I am forced by the violence of the state, like all philosophers of the past, such as Socrates, Aristotle, and David Hume, to self-censor. Like Aristotle, I live in exile. If I was offered the option of hemlock, like Socrates, I might consider it. But to be savagely beaten to death like Pythagoras, or Orpheus, or worse, to be locked in solitary like Ernst Zundel, David Irving, and many others, simply for daring to voice skepticism, and seek a fair, open, and public debate concerned with the legal fact and official narrative of National Socialism referred to generally as the Holocaust, isn't on my list of things to do. If I am brought before any court, I will simply go along with whatever that inquisition requires of me, to reduce the personal suffering it chooses to impose upon me, as a punishment for being a philosopher. Philosophy, the quest for truth and justice, was never welcome in this world. I have to expect to be punished, again and again, until I die, for being a philosopher. I accept that. Here's the main point. Self-censorship does not change what people believe. Why produce it then? Well, because of what we call collective ignorance. You see, if you can get most people to act as if they believe something, it will give everyone the impression that everyone believes it, so it must be true. To all you fellow Aussies, I'll refer to that common retort, and if everyone was jumping off the harbor bridge. That is the logic behind Holocaust denial and the associated hate speech laws. To get people to self-censor. To create the illusion of consensus opinion about the actions of National Socialism. The idea is to have everyone believe that everyone else believes that the Holocaust narrative is historical fact. We tend to go along to get along. David Hume detailed the two main bases of our beliefs: authority and the weight of overwhelming public opinion. Now, while we might not be automatically impressed by an idea, because a few people believe it, a sort of alchemy occurs when everyone appears to believe something. The power of authority is more obvious. Experts and publicly recognized celebrity clever people, or even just actors in lab coats, all offer transferred authority to an idea or belief. Even tradition does this. Even for the most frivolous of hearsay, such as religious dogmas. And if everyone appears to believe and accept something, it attains a new status. Even if it is clearly absurd. Even if it is impossible, all things being equal, based on our own personal experience, and everything else we know. Cognitive dissonance is tolerated and we get dogmas and articles of faith, and other superstitious beliefs. I mean, if everyone is jumping off the harbor bridge, then surely they must have a good reason to. And if I can't see it? Who'd dare trust their own judgment, in the face of such clear evidence that it must be a good thing to do? Or at least necessary. Even if I can't actually see any good reason, or clear danger, I'm likely to jump on the bandwagon, or in this case, off the bridge. Especially if the alternative is to be stoned to death by my own family members, or burned alive, after being forced to watch my family members being tortured to death. Shit that really happened, folks, for simply denying some dogma of the cult of Judah, in the past. Oh, and cult of Judah is not some really clever code word for Jews. The Jews were simply the first victim of this cult. And remain the longest running, continual victims of this cult. I am seeking to save the self-defined Jews from this cult. And to save the rest of us. To save us all from this cult of Judah. Which just happens to be most publicly associated/affiliated with that self-defined identity/cultural/religious group called the Jews. So again, don't bother trying to stick some anti-Semitic label on me. It won't faze me. Anyone who sees me will see with their own eyes that I have no irrational fear or malice regarding Jews as a self-defined group. Charging a person who happens to be a rabbi with incitement to genocide and hate speech is not anti-Semitic. The motivation has nothing to do with whether or not that person defines themselves as Jewish, and might be defined by others as such. The Pope in the Vatican is as much the enemy of the people as any rabbi. And I am not motivated by anyone's self-defined identification as Jew or Catholic, when I seek to have particular individuals held accountable for their actions. Which in the case of the rabbi in my videos, is clearly criminal in intent and nature. Clearly incitement to genocide. Clearly racial vilification. I will only ever speak publicly about Holocaust denial laws. I will never publicly challenge the legal narrative, the legal fact, of the Holocaust. Anyone who seeks to have me do so, is either working for the cult of Judah, or doing their work for free. I will assume they are either stupid, or have malicious intents, if anyone seeks to have me publicly challenge the legal fact of the Holocaust. I won't do it. Anyone who claims I did do it, within the legal jurisdiction of German or Australian authorities, will be lying. Don't you attempt to have me say anything that would be defined as criminal, or I will assume you are unknowingly, or secretly, working for the cult of Judah. I won't trust you. I will distance myself from you. If you want to be a martyr, go ahead. I have better things to do with the rest of this life as Marcus. Such as convincing people that Holocaust denial laws are not in the interests of the general public, nor in the interests of the special interest group most closely publicly associated with such laws. I am taking huge personal risks publishing this. And I have nothing personal to gain from writing this. So anyone who does not respect this and actually read what is written here, and report on the actual argument presented, is a scumbag that it would be a waste of time attempting to reason with, and seriously has no right to complain when they become the victim of any injustice. For as you do unto others so shall be done unto you, Obadiah. So do your very best to actually attend to the arguments presented here. They are likely to be misrepresented by any third party opposed to freedom of speech when it comes to the legal, official Holocaust narrative. Firstly, this document is not about denying this official, legal narrative. This document accepts that, just as financial corporations are defined, under law, as persons, so, the Holocaust narrative we have all had imposed on us is legal fact. This document is not about attempting to challenge this legal ruling. If you believe legal courts are the appropriate place to carry out historical investigation, to arrive at definitive conclusions concerning scientific matters, and to define reality, then I guess you have little time for scientific investigation, or compelling argument. You are happy to accept the dogmatic rulings handed down by judges in legal proceedings, and enforced by all the violence at the disposal of the state. This is exactly what occurred during the many inquisitions held by the various cults which ruled the various civilizations throughout history. Arbitrary dogmas, beliefs that had no scientific basis, were forced upon the people by legal decrees, and enforced by state violence. Often death penalties for merely denying some article of faith, or some religious dogma, or some secular dogma. Often carried out by the family members of the denier. The heretic. The apostate. The infidel. There is no way you can claim that we today have ever had a free, fair, open, and free debate concerning the Holocaust. Or that a free and fair debate concerning the official, legal narrative of the Holocaust, is even possible. Consider a debate situation, or a scientific inquiry, where you can have your opponent socially, economically, professionally, and financially destroyed for challenging you. Even imprisoned for offering an argument, a fact, scientific evidence, that actually demonstrates your argument to be, based on the observable and provable and demonstrable facts, literally an impossibility, caeteris paribus, all things being equal. Clearly there can be no debate under such conditions. This situation would never be described as a free, fair, and open debate. So to claim that the debate was won and the matter settled, during the Nuremberg proceedings, or by some later court in Germany or Australia, would be naive and ignorant at best. Most likely disingenuous on the part of the more intelligent person. While the average person has probably not given the matter that much consideration, and has simply accepted that the matter has been proven beyond any reasonable doubt. However, the conditions under which something could be proven beyond any reasonable doubt clearly do not exist in a show trial. That is what Stalin openly described the Nuremberg proceedings as. Proceedings where confessions were gained via torture, and threats of starving family members to death, if the powerless victim did not confess to whatever crimes they were accused of. Facts. I am no denying that confessions were signed. I am clarifying that they were signed as the alternative was torture, and the death of family members. They were not signed because the statements reflected any reality. There is not one person reading this who would not have signed a confession relating to anything at all, if the alternative was continued torture, and the painful deaths of their loved ones. I do not deny the verdict of the Nuremberg trials. Like I do not deny that, legally speaking, a financial corporation is a person in Australia and Germany. I do not deny the Holocaust. the legal and official narrative concerning the experience of a particular group under National Socialism. It is what it is. A legal document. Just as a financial corporation is, legally, a person. I am aware of these facts. I am not insane. I do not see a legal document stating that in Australia or Germany a financial corporation is legally a person and claim otherwise. Under the law, legally, a financial corporation can be a person. And if the law states categorically and dogmatically that 1 + 1 = 2, then I would not be so insane as to go about publicly claiming that the law does not state this. For what the law states, is the law. The law of the Pharisees was to publicly stone anyone who publicly said Jehovah. Why would I deny that? And why would I bother going about saying Jehovah in public? Jesus was highly motivated, either as real person or character in a myth, and believed that by sacrificing himself, he'd achieve something worthwhile. I don't see any benefit coming to anyone from directly confronting the cult of Judah agents. So I won't. Jesus never denied that the law of the Pharisees was the law. Of course Jesus was given an fair trial, by the Pharisees, right? Under their law, he was. And given a fair sentence. Under their laws. Right? He said things much nastier than Brendan O'Connell ever publicly uttered, concerning the cult of Judah. So he'd of course be spending time in an Australian prison right now, if he was around, and behaved the same way the character in the Gospels does. Facts, people. Are you going to deny them? Like Judas denied Jesus 3 times. Perhaps it is ironic that under later laws, in different lands, people were burned alive, after being cruelly tortured, until they confessed to being in league with the devil. After denying the Trinity. Or denying that Jesus was born to a virgin, performed miracles, was killed, then arose from death, to ascend to heaven. Or denying that there is only one God, and Mohammed is his prophet. Or for denying that scientific socialism was a fact. Or that Stalin was a loving servant of the people. Or for denying the Holocaust. How often in human history has the legal fact contradicted the scientific fact? And which one is it sane to proclaim in public, to avoid being tortured to death? And which one is it sane to base your engineering calculations on, when building your home, or a bridge, or a car? It is clearly sane to publicly keep any doubts or skepticism, that 1 + 1 = 3, to yourself, and never publicly voicing any doubts, let alone arguing against this legal fact. No sane person would publicly challenge any legally binding dogma where the punishment for doing so is extreme. Solzhenitsyn made the observation that the average Russian, during the Soviet reign of terror, were not even willing to risk losing their job. It was rarely necessary to threaten anything worse than that. Tell me what you would be willing to risk, if you stumbled upon some corruption, or became absolutely convinced that something the public were being told by their own government was in fact a lie. Would you risk anything to blow the whistle? You'd have to be highly motivated, right? And of course those you blew the whistle on would claim your motives were evil, destructive, selfish, and even insane. Would you expect anything less? They would demonize you as much as they could. Attempt to undermine your credibility as a witness and whistleblower. Right? Attempt to destroy any respect you had earned, challenging your integrity, and by destroying the credibility and status of the messenger, thus destroy the believability and status of the message itself. Right? The same is clear in a show trial where the verdict has already been agreed upon before the proceedings began. Before any real investigation is even attempted. And is going to be imposed, no matter what facts, arguments, and findings, the defense offer. If you, the Australian and German government, and all the various special interest groups involved, seriously believe you are right, and are motivated by a desire for justice and truth, then you certainly would welcome a free and open debate, simply to give yourselves the opportunity to clarify, and enlighten those people who do not find your legally binding official narrative compelling. Surely if the facts are compelling, you would welcome each and every opportunity to present them. In other words, people who are confident they are in the right, welcome the chance to debate their subject in free and open debates. For this offers them the chance to convince others, based on compelling arguments. I certainly welcome free and fair debate on any subject I have published anything on. As a chance to hold my own ideas up to scrutiny, and find any flaws in them. To offer alternative perspectives. To offer any factual evidence or compelling arguments I may not have been aware of, or have considered. To flag assumptions I have made, without realizing it. To have assumptions I have knowingly made, challenged. One problem with punishing people for publicly voicing skepticism or doubt, is that they will self-censor, and you will never know what they really believe, and are basing their decisions on. If you want to avoid people committing hate crimes, based on irrational and unfounded fears and malice, censoring them publicly will only lead to them keeping their irrational beliefs private. You won't have a chance to change them through public discussion. They will act one way in public, then commit their crimes the moment they have the opportunity to do so. Because their motives still exist. When a special interest group have David Icke refused a visa to enter Australia, to speak openly and freely about what he believes, and to present the reasons why he believes these things, they are not exercising their power responsibly, and certainly not in the interests of the people they claim to represent. They merely publicly display their own intolerance, by persecuting someone whose views they disagree with, and their own excessive power. For the only people I've heard of having visas refused were historical revisionists and Holocaust deniers. I've yet to hear of any convicted criminal, murderous dictator, or actual terrorist, having had a visa application refused. Would the Australian authorities refuse a visa for the visit of a rabbi who openly calls for the genocide of all Germans, Italians, and even Americans? How would I even find out if that rabbi had made a visa application? How did the special interest group that had David Icke refused a visa, manage this feat? Can the average Australian have someone denied a visa, by claiming someone is a Holocaust denier and publicly outspoken against forced multiple vaccinations of infants? Clearly, if I ever return to Australia or Germany, I will not challenge the legal fact and legal official narrative called the Holocaust. Because it is a legal fact. Just like the fact that a corporation is legally a person. Of course, as a philosopher, in a private discussion, I might challenge the notion that a corporation is a person, and thus deserving of human rights. But in public, I'd be insane too. Why would I risk losing everything, including long prison sentences, simply to challenge something obviously a legal fiction? One constructed to serve the interests of a very powerful vested interest group. Namely the corporation owners. The ones who sought to benefit from having their corporations defined, legally, as persons. And thus granted all the usual human rights that other persons enjoy. But what if some corporation claimed the right, as a person, to one of my kidneys? At what point does the legal fiction remain harmless? When there are no costs associated with publicly going along with a legal fiction, few people are going to risk paying a huge cost simply to challenge what is obviously a fiction. But what if they learned that there were really huge costs attached to that public conformity with that legal fiction? What if they learned that their child's school was being built on the assumption that 1 + 1 = 3? Or their daughter's car designers were assuming the same? Or that their financial advisors' advice and decisions were being based on that same legal fiction? That same legal fact? I don't know if the books I've written and published in Estonia, where they were not considered criminal, legally make me a criminal in Australia and Germany, simply as I am an Australian and German citizen. It is quite possible. But I consider this a private conversation, and in this private conversation I am alluding to books and videos I've already published, while an Estonian resident, living under Estonian laws, where 1 + 1 = 2, and you are legally allowed to publicly state that. So if you want to find out what I've found out, concerning the official legal fact and narrative called the Holocaust, you can do so. But I will not publicly refer to those publications. As I am sane. and I realize that doing so could bring no benefit to anyone, and would cost he a huge deal of suffering, misery, and pain, and make my life itself not worth enduring. A fate worse than death awaits the Holocaust-Denier. Just like in all the previous inquisitions during human history, where stating the obvious, or challenging some legal fact that was held dogmatically as an article of faith, was punished by fates worse than death. Deterrence to free, open, and fair debate, in the extreme. Why the need for such horrific and drastic methods of censorship? Because it could not be scientifically proven, God has every superpower other than the power of speech, or because it had in fact been demonstrated to be laughably impossible, and so any real discussion, any real scientific or philosophical inquiry, could never be allowed to take place. No free and open and fair debate could be tolerated. Because the articles of faith were so fragile, so vulnerable to being disproven and rejected, that no priest in their right mind would dare allow any free, open, and fair, public debate on the subject. The only way to maintain such a lie was by threatening and handing out fates worse than death, to anyone who dared to publicly voice the slightest skepticism or doubt, let alone openly challenge and deny the article of faith in question. And in doing so, deny the authority of the priests and other nobles whose authority and power rested almost entirely upon those articles of faith. Upon that dogma. For if your authority rested in some invisible God with no voice, or interest in communicating, then doubts about the very existence of that God, let alone on what it commanded, would raise doubts about the validity and legitimacy of that power base, and that power itself. In other words, the transferred authority of the priest and kings, was only going to be considered legitimate, and accepted, as long as the dogma concerning the existence of that God itself was accepted. Now ask yourself why a certain special interest group managed to get such legal protection of its own official narrative. To have it declared legal fact. To have anyone who dares challenge any part of it defined as criminal, and punished more severely than a rapist or armed bank robber. Do you have your career ruined, be bankrupted, and put in prison for years for questioning any facts surrounding the Armenian genocide? Or the genocide of Australian Aboriginals in Tasmania? Or American indigenous Indians in North, Central, or South America? Or whether Mary was a virgin? Or whether Jesus was killed, came back to life, and ascended to heaven? Or whether Allah is the only God, and Muhammad is his prophet? Here is my main argument. You may think that producing collective ignorance by manufacturing the illusion of overwhelming public opinion, will lead to most people accepting some belief as fact. Of course, religion is all about social conditioning of people from birth to accept some article of faith as fact. To have an emotional attachment to received wisdom as knowledge. The Inquisitions were always on hand to punish anyone whose social conditioning failed, with fates worse than death, to send a clear message to anyone else who might consider publicly voicing contrary beliefs, or expressing doubt or skepticism about them, not to do so. But take a look at history. How many wars and famines and totally avoidable horrific cruelty and suffering has resulted from such behaviors on the part of authorities? If you seriously believe the official Holocaust narratives, then you will want to share the reasons for this belief with everyone. Or is it that you doubt, secretly, that the reasons you believe in the Holocaust narrative, is that your beliefs are based on no more than hearsay? Over and over you will hear public figures stating everyone knows and it has been proven over and over. And everyone will quote other people as saying this. Over and over. But when you go back and trace the history of these statements, they lead to just more people saying the same thing. Actual scientific evidence and proof and compelling arguments that add up do not form the basis of this fact that everyone knows and is not the way in which these facts have been proven, time and again. What all such highest level of abstraction statements reduce to are legal verdicts. The first of the Nuremberg trials, which Stalin openly called show trials, and where defendants were forced to sign confessions using torture and threats to torture family members to death, for refusal to sign. I am not saying anything here about the facts of the experience of Jews under National Socialism. I am stating the facts that torture was used to get people to sign confessions. Just like in all the previous inquisitions. Is that a crime in Australia and Germany? I am stating that the narrative offered as legal fact does not add up. It is not compelling. So offer me a better one. If you are so sure and certain that you know 6 million, recently an Australian host of Channel 10 in an interrogation of David Icke stated the figure was 6 to 12 million, Jews were gassed, he says shot and gassed, in death camps, then please share with me why and how you can claim to know this. Please, let us vote in a referendum, on a temporary suspension of Holocaust denial laws, so that we can once and for all, armed with almost 80 years of research and investigation, once and for all work out what we can claim to know about National Socialism's treatment of Jews. Why? Well, so you can share the reasons why you believe the official, legal, Holocaust narrative. So we can all share in this with you. So that all the Holocaust deniers can be enlightened, and become like you, true believers. Stop claiming everyone knows and it's been proven over and over again, and that anyone who refuses to believe is in denial of the obvious facts. What obvious facts? When and how were these facts established? In a court of law, behind closed doors, with prearranged verdicts, and confessions forced out of people via torture? What do you really know? Why do you believe? What is the basis of that belief? Are Hollywood films historical documentaries? Are courts of law the appropriate place to determine historical accuracy? Are lawyers and judges the right people to write our history? Or perhaps professionally trained historians? Did any society benefit from censorship of views which challenged, or were dubious or skeptical of, the hegemonic dominant articles of faith, dogmas, and public opinion? Is having people self-censor, and go about pretending to believe something, a recipe for national sanity and public mental health? If it has been proven, then show us the proof. Clear up our confusion. Or are you intent on insulting everyone who disagrees with you? I find that offensive. Your belief that you have the right to impute malicious motives to anyone who disagrees with your opinions. And what I find appalling is that you are not apparently interested in discovering the basis of your opinions. What are your beliefs based on? Do you believe anything a court of law tells you is legal fact? Are corporations really persons? People. I'm interested in your opinions as a sociologist. I'm much more interested in how you formed those opinions. As a philosopher. As a citizen. As someone who will suffer as a result of what you believe. Because our actions are motivated by our beliefs. And right now you are all consenting to tyranny. To despotism. To censorship. To submission to the cult of Judah's Inquisition. Whether you identify yourself as a Jew, or Catholic, or Christian, or Marxist or as white or black or whatever, is of no interest to me, in this context. For we are all suffering under the cult of Judah occupation of our nations. We are all submitting to the cult of Judah's control. Ask yourself why we allow our governments to do the things they have done. The last being the demonization of the democratically elected Venezuelan government, and the sanctioning of waging economic warfare against the Venezuelan people, in an attempt to blackmail them into accepting the cult of Judah puppet occupation government leader they have pre-selected, groomed, and plan to install against the real wishes and interests of the Venezuelan people? Since when did Australia or Germany have the right to decide who rules another sovereign nation? And yet you are party to this occupation of Venezuela, and any suffering that occurs, because of your passive acceptance of the actions of your cult of Judah occupation government. Oh, sorry, you hadn't noticed you'd been occupied by the cult of Judah? Oh, and you don't distinguish between the cult that has enslaved millions of Jews, and billions of Gentiles, and the general Jewish community? Maybe you have some researching to do. And you need to learn to distinguish among the many, varied, different, heterogeneous, subgroups and distinct identities and groups associated with the general term Jewish. Because I do distinguish clearly between the many different Jewish groups, and beliefs. I do not generalize. I do not blame Jews in general any more than I blame any other group, in general. Cult of Judah agent/affiliate is not some super clever legalistic weasel world hoping to evade the censors and avoid legal prosecution for anti-Semitism. I am a philosopher, not a lawyer. I don't play games with words. I define words. I flag assumptions. I challenge assumptions. Of course, I will never publicly challenge the assumption that most of you make, that the Holocaust narrative has been proven beyond any doubt, over and over, scientifically, independently, historically, and documented, and all the possible grounds for skepticism have been cleared up. But I will state that unless you know the actual details you imagine exist, upon which the official narrative is supposedly based, you do not know anything at all, and are just assuming that what you've been told is true. And if that is how you plan to go about your life, assuming what people in authority or what others appear to believe must be true, then you are welcome to enjoy the consequences. If, on the other hand, you want to discover why other people clearly do not believe the official narrative, and wish to have the chance to enlighten them, and also discover the basis for your own beliefs, so you can be certain they are based on factual evidence, compelling argument, and the best reasons scientists and historians can offer, then you will join me in demanding a suspension of the Holocaust denial laws, and the opening up of free and open debate. What this will do is allow us all to differentiate between the real anti-Semites, and those who are just ignorant and confused. I want to distance myself from, and enlighten, any real anti-Semites out there, to have a chance to educate them about our common, shared enemy. To get Jews and Gentiles working together to free us from our common enemies. During this predetermined time of free speech we will get a chance to learn what people really think and believe. Wouldn't that be a novelty? Aren't you curious as to what people really think about the Holocaust? If you are a true believer, then aren't you keen for a chance to educate people about why you are so certain you know that the Holocaust official legal narrative is truth? To explain to me why you believe it? How you know it to be true? Guide me through all the documents and scientific research and complete eyewitness testimonies, not the ones that end with "I know they were gassed because I never saw them again, and I was warned this was going to happen by other Jews," but the ones that end with "I saw with my own eyes people being gassed and cremated," and so on. How many years of your life have you devoted to researching the Holocaust? Are you really qualified to have any opinion on the matter? Really? Based on what? Hearsay. Hollywood movies based on books and screenplays that state clearly on page 1 that they are fiction? Books written by several authors, over different time periods, including long after her death, then sold as a diary of one girl, Anne Frank? Allied wartime propaganda? To justify and legitimate the war crimes the Allies committed against Germans and their allies? Wouldn't you like the chance to know why some people reject the official Holocaust narrative, and treat it as pure propaganda? As pure lies? Are they all just raving lunatics with an irrational fear and hatred of all Jews? How many of your closest friends are actually skeptical, but simply won't risk expressing their doubts? Do you really care about Jews and about avoiding war, violence, persecution, and genocide? Are you so sure that Holocaust denial laws are the best way to protect what you believe to be a threatened group? Would you like the freedom to hear from the dissenting voices? The divergent minds out there? The people who do not believe everything their governments tell them? Where would we be today, if the Spanish Inquisition still ruled over us all? Where would homosexuals be? Where would women be? Where would all non-Catholics be? Better off? Really? This is not a denial of the Holocaust as a legal fact. I do not deny that corporations are, legally, persons. What I deny, and can prove, is that Holocaust denial laws do the Jews, and the rest of us, more harm than good. And if that is fine by you, to continue harming Jews, then continue. For it is you who is not concerning yourself with the welfare of the Jews, and not me. I wish to free the Jews, and the rest of us, from the cult of Judah. I cannot do that unless you demand the freedom of speech I require to attempt this feat, which will come at huge personal costs to me. Don't demand the laws be suspended. Don't support free speech. Fine. I'll leave you, and the Jews among you, to your fate. I'll share it, of course. But at least I have a chance of freedom, when I die, and may avoid returning to this hell on earth ever again. I wasted another day of my life on this. What sacrifices have you ever made for our collective good? All I ask is that you suspend judgment and suspend disbelief, and allow people a chance to educate you, and be educated by you. But remember, anyone can have an opinion. My cat had lots of opinions. As do the worms, the birds, the pigs. Every sentient being has opinions. What I'm interested in is why you believe what you believe. Is it really based on personal experience? Scientific evidence? Peer-reviewed and free and open public debate? Facts? Evidence? Compelling arguments? Or is it, like most religious beliefs, based on the mere feeling that it is right? And where did that feeling come from? What, ultimately, are your opinions based on? Your self-belief that you are a genius with brilliant insights into the world around you? Intuition? Everyone else knows it to be true? Tradition? Lots of authorities with impressive costumes and diplomas and high-status social positions. Celebrities believe it? Your parents believed it, and they were never wrong? Your government says it is so, and governments have never lied to anyone? This is a private conversation between me and you. You can find my publications, published in Estonia, where it is legal to do so, if you choose to look for them. They are banned in Australia and Germany. If I had published them in Australia, or Germany, I would have ended up in jail. And if I refused to be a team player and go along to get along, I'd still be in jail in Australia or Germany now. Or worse. In which case I would not have been free to write and publish this. I guess I will pay a huge price for being Marcus. Could I have chosen to be a mere sheeple? Or Mittlofer? Does anyone have free will? Well, if there is any free will, I am expressing it in my choice to accept the personal costs, as the necessary cost of trying to benefit billions of sentient beings, for eternity. Jesus supposedly died on the cross for us all. I do the much harder sacrifice, of living for us all. I've been crucified by migraines, and people, over and over. Jesus died just once. And he was apparently convinced it would be worth it. At very least he'd save himself, and return to his Godhead. I guess I will return to my Godhead soon enough. But I'll keep working to save us all, for as long as I am Marcus. Only don't try to get me to say what you want me to say, publicly. I'm approaching the level of sophistication of my adversaries, the COJA, the cult of Judah agents/affiliates. This is why we love our enemies. Our adversaries. They force us to up our own game. To become the best self we can. This is why no real competitor hates their adversary. They love them, for forcing them to evolve. To push their own limits. To extend themselves. To go beyond what they would have, if not forced to, by their opponents. I have so much to share with you. But this unity of apparent opposites is too hard to express in a few words here. Just let it be known that the lessons I have learned, often thanks to the most evil people, are more valuable than any of the few pleasures and benefits and rewards I might have enjoyed at the hands of friends. In this way the cult of Judah itself may be responsible for my personal evolution, even if most of its members are opportunistic, destructive, nasty, malicious, and cruel, and with the worst and most selfish of motivations. For better or worse, the cult of Judah rules this world. You can see it clearly in what is happening vis-a-vis Venezuela. Then go back in history with open eyes. This link referral is made in private, to you, and not for public consumption, or for public consumption. TROONATNOOR Patreon /bitchute.com/tube.video/WordPress And to be clear, you can only deny something that you believe, or at very least, has been proven beyond any doubt, according to the highest principles of science and philosophy, and at very least compliant with the rules I have for compelling arguments. Do you really want to know for sure, if such conditions were ever met by the people who imposed, by threat of all the violence of the state, the Holocaust narrative as legal fact on you? Do you want to know all the lies your own governments have been telling you? Just between you and me, in private? TROONATNOOR patreon/bitchute.com/tube.video/wordpress. I am not saying that the Holocaust is one of them. There is no law against exposing the other lies you've been told, about everything from Jesus, to WWI, World War II, Iraq, Syria, Venezuela, oh the list goes on, and of course includes 9/11, which was where my journey down the rabbit hole actually begun. What about you? Is this the best of all possible worlds for you? Or maybe you suspect there might be better ways to be. More satisfying, rewarding, fulfilling, pleasurable, and enjoyable lives available to you, which are being withheld from you. Marcus Rebuck. Please send sweets and guitars and strings to me in prison. They might even let me enjoy some of them. But I doubt it. You will see the special treatment that philosophers receive from governments. They claim to be the expression of the quest for truth and justice, existing in your interests. But they have always persecuted philosophers like myself. Because we are really seeking what is in your interests, because we are one of you, and will never behave opportunistically, because our eye is on a very long game, and the real prize. Written March 2, 2019, in a land of freedom of speech and democracy, Estonia. Oh how my neck hurts after hours of writing this. Aloy, lama, sabach tani. Shalom.